In this lesson, we'll learn a little about how the Mari interface is set up and how it can be customized. All right, great. So I have here the Lesson 3 Begin Mari Archive open. If you want to check inside your Mari Files folder within the project files, you'll find this archive. You can open it up and follow along. So with that said, as soon as you open this archive, I want to really talk about kind of navigating around your project. So the first thing we need to talk about is the Alt key. The Alt key is sort of your center point for most of your navigation controls. So if we were to hold the Alt key and left click and drag, you can see here we can begin to orbit around our asset. If we hold down the middle click and the Alt key at the same time, we can pan our asset. And if we Alt and right click, we can begin to zoom in and out on our asset here. So now there is one other thing we can do, and it is actually a little different keyboard shortcut. It is the Control R keyboard shortcut, and that's going to allow us to roll the asset here inside the Mari canvas. All right, fantastic. Now with that said, let's talk a little bit about the different views available to us here. Now, we learned in the last lesson about the forums for the community as well as the projects view or tab up here. But there are 4 new ones here that become available to us when we have a project open. So the first one and the default one is going to be your orthographic view or your orthographic camera. So this is where most of your painting is going to take place when you're painting in sort of a 3D view. We do have access to a perspective view here, and you can see here basically allows us to look at our asset through a perspective camera. I typically don't access this view much until kind of the end of my texturing process where I'm wanting to sort of preview the asset with some perspective. Now, we do also have the ability to look at this asset in the UV view, or the UV tab. And inside this tab, you'll notice here that we actually have 3 different 0 to 1 spaces here. And if we kind of zoom in here on the first one, you'll notice here that there's a little identifier in the lower left-hand corner. That is the UDIM number for this particular patch, and as well as the resolution that is currently assigned to the channel that's selected. So we'll learn more about channels in just a couple of lessons, but you can see here is 1002. That's the second UDIM number, and then 1003 here. So this is essentially utilizing a multi-tile workflow where we have the textures for this asset spread out over multiple 0 to 1 spaces. And Mari does support that. So with that said, we also have a combined orthographic and UV view where it will load up the orthographic view here on one side and the UV view on another. And you can work back and forth between the two if you need to. All right, great. So let's come back over here to the orthographic view, and let's talk a little bit about display properties, because there's a couple of things that I typically do when I'm recording my Mari courses, and once you've worked within Mari long enough, you'll probably end up hiding this heads-up display right here. It has a lot of really useful information in it, like keyboard shortcuts for the currently selected tool, as well as the shader that's selected, the object, and things of that nature. So, but this, in my opinion, as I'm kind of working and texturing, actually kind of gets in the way, as does occasionally this grid right down here. So we can turn both of those off under the View menu and Display Properties, and we'll get this little dialog, and we can come in and turn off the HUD, as well as the visibility for the grid, and both of those get hidden. Now we can texture freely. Fantastic. So let's talk about toolbars and palettes for just a moment. So inside the Mari interface, everything up here is a toolbar. Now there's multiple toolbars, and you can see that they're separated by this little perforation right here. And when I mouse over that, we can actually grab these toolbars and we can move them, just like so. And we can dock them in other places. Now, I'm going to go ahead and drag that back up because I want those all in their current position. But notice that this is also a toolbar right over here. Again, we have that little perforated line. Now the toolbars can be accessed if we maybe want to turn some of them off or turn some on that aren't currently on. We can simply right click on the empty area over here, and you can see here this large menu comes up. Let's skip over these things at the top first and look down at the bottom, and you'll see these little menus or these little options that have a check mark next to them. Those are toolbars that are currently visible. Notice my color space is not currently visible. If I wanted to turn that on, I can just simply select that here, and you'll see the color space toolbar shows up at the bottom of the UI. All right, fantastic. Now, what are these other things that we have listed above our toolbars? These are actually palettes, and you'll notice that the orange ones are the ones that are currently visible. We can also access the palettes right up here under the View menu and Palettes, and you can see that same listing right in here. I find it quicker to just right-click on the toolbars up here and access them. So let's go ahead and open up the Objects palette right here. If I go ahead and select that, you'll notice that this Objects palette pops up. And you can see here we can come in and we can begin to kind of narrow the column for that. We can do a lot of different things with this palette, which, by the way, in the Objects palette, this is where multiple OBJ files will show up if they are inside your file. Now, with a palette, you can come in here and you can minimize it with this button. You can see we've sort of collapsed it here. We can float it out into our workspace using this button right here. And you can see it actually floated out of my recording area. Let me drag it back in, just like so. And we can dock it back simply by clicking on that button one more time. Or we can close it out altogether, just like so. All right, fantastic. So these are palettes inside of Mari, and you can see there are actually multiple palettes over here. We have tabs for each one. We also have some tabs inside some of the palettes. In this case, we have a Properties, Shelves, and Presets tab, and the Shelves tab actually has multiple shelf tabs right along in here. So feel free to explore the palettes, but really quickly, I want to kind of show you one other UI thing that, I consider it a UI element, and that's the way that we are basically lighting our asset here. You'll notice here if we zoom in, this asset is fully lit. It has shadows, it has highlights, and sometimes that can be difficult to deal with when you're texturing. You can come over here and switch your lighting mode to basic, and that's going to turn off your highlights if those are preventing you from painting what you want to paint. Or you can switch to flat lit mode, which will turn off all lighting, both shadows and highlights for your asset. All right, fantastic. So with that said, let's move on to our next lesson, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about making selections here in Mari.